What do you mean?
Once the Holy Grail War begins, it will be over in less than a month, correct?
Why are you bringing that up?
Hearing what she had to say next, my mentor fell silent.
Edelfelds participated in the Third Holy Grail War as well.
I never thought I would hear that from this person. The Third Holy Grail War, a battle that had happened before the one my mentor participated in. In that case, the participants were from her grandmother's generation. Seeing my mentor's expression, Luvia smiled gracefully.
Oh, so you didn't know.
I have done a limited amount of research into you and your family.
Well, I'd see why you wouldn't know that. We didn't manage to achieve anything remarkable in the Third Holy Grail War. That is a stain on our reputation, so it was not made public. There are still some insignificant rumors regarding it, though.
I already knew how strong of a mage Luvia was. Her ancestors were probably the same. Even so, the Edelfelt family had failed to achieve victory, which was an insight into the terrifying side of the Holy Grail War. She stared silently at my mentor. What if, I thought? She had always been particularly harsh toward my mentor. At first I thought this was just her natural attitude towards everyone. But what if that was because she had complicated feelings toward him, because her predecessors had lost while he had survived?
Edelfelt sent 2 people to participate through special means, but only 1 person managed to return. However, you were alone and still remained unharmed. Yes, only someone who has achieved something that my family has not is worthy of becoming my tutor.
So, you haven't given up on making me your tutor.
I've never given up on anything until now, so I don't know how to.
As she said this, Luvia held up the bag beside her. Inside, there was a small box which was decorated lavishly with gems. Maybe because it was under some kind of magecraft, every gem glittered with an uncanny glow. I could only tell that it was more than just expensive.
Please, consider this as a lecture fee.
The Department of Modern Magecraft generally doesn't charge individuals for listening to lectures.
Then take this as an exception.
At Luvia's urging, my mentor opened the box. His eyes widened in shock.
Why would you have this?
I am Luvia Edelfelt. That is reason enough, isn't it? Do whatever you like with it. Of course I'm looking forward to having you as my tutor, like you said before. The Edelfelt's jewel magecraft does not rely on the value itself, but rather how value can be exchanged.
Those were my mentor's words back from the Castle of Separation. It was also why she asked him to become her tutor, and now Luvia based her declaration upon it.
I await your answer. Value has been exchanged. I await your answer.
With that, Luvia left without saying another word. She didn't look back, either. She had decided what she needed to do a long time ago, and now that it was done, she would leave without a fuss. Those were the duties of a noble who dedicated her time to something greater than herself. The clock tower might see the Edelfelts as outsiders, but to Luvia, her last name embodied her aristocratic spirit. It was ironic in a way. She, as weirdly uplifting, bowed and left as well. Only my mentor and I remained. The hand that placed the jewels box onto the table was still stiff. Sitting on the sofa, my mentor took out a Trum's envelope again and put it beside the box. Finally, a hoarse voice swept across the table.
Hi.
Like drops of rain, he spoke syllable by syllable.
I still can't make myself stop heartless. No matter what I do, my wishes will get in the way. Even though it isn't in the way I hoped, I can't find a reason to risk so much to stop him.
Word by word, as if he was stopping to think about everything he said. That must be Heartless's goal. He didn't defeat his enemies. Rather, he made them disappear. It was almost as if it was a quote from The Art of War. This strategy had undoubtedly captured my mentor. It was why my mentor hadn't left his office after he checked that Rainus and the students were safe.
And yet, it was the same in the Holy Grail War as well. I only survived because I was lucky in the worst possible way. I had no intention of surviving.
He unclenched his hands. Of course, there was nothing in the palms of his hands, just as the war had not left him with anything that could be seen. You had no intention of surviving?
But I was ordered to. I was ordered by my king. Dash live, he said. And that's why I did. No matter how miserable and embarrassing it was, I lived. I journeyed the world and then came all the way back here, to this tower. I bought the El-Melloi classroom even though I knew I didn't have the means to maintain it. I even put myself into the shackles of being a lord, even though I know I'm underqualified.
His voice shook the entire room. Even though it wasn't loud, the emotion in my mentor's voice was too strong and tangible. I suppose you could call it a mournful cry. For 10 years, my mentor had been tormented by this whirlpool of contradictions. Finally, the devil's hand had found my mentor to be a sacrifice.
And now, for no reason other than luck, I've been given a choice.
Was it really just because he was lucky? Was that the only reason why my mentor had made it to this point?
I should. Oh.
His expression was twisted, and his teeth were clenched as he tried his best to urge himself to action.
I should get up. I have to get up. I have to, because it's what I've always done. Because everyone places their expectations on me. Because I've done something to make myself look worthy of it. Yes, that must be why.
Up until this point, many mages had commented on my mentor. Some said he was blessed. Other, more skilled mages sometimes trusted him, and sometimes antagonized him. Either way, he managed to rise to a prestigious position in the world of magecraft. However, who wished for this? This person had never wished to become Lord El-Melloi II. This person had never wished to hold this much power within the clock tower. All of this was only atonement for past crimes. He only inherited the El-Melloi classroom because of what he did in the Fourth Holy Grail War. But now, my mentor felt like he needed to stand. Even with all of this anguish and these contradictions, there must be something wrong with this. Suddenly, there was a sound. Ah! That was the sound of my hand, gently hitting my mentor's face. I don't think it's because you have to. My mentor stared at me, surprised. Though I hadn't managed to slap him, it should still have hurt a little. Maybe I didn't use the right amount of force. But I couldn't tell, because both my hands and face seemed to be burning. Why? I knew I was being unreasonable, but for some reason, I wanted to cry. I don't. Worried how should I organize my thoughts. Simply opening my mouth and making sounds was a meaningless act. I needed to add meaning to it, because I had something to say. Even if it was merely according to my own will, I had something I had to tell my mentor. That was probably why I had knocked on the door to this room. Worried My mentor still stared blankly at me. That made sense. I had gotten angry and hit my mentor without permission. And now, I couldn't even speak in full sentences. My face still felt like it was on fire. I probably still ended up crying. How embarrassing. I wanted to dive into a crack in the floor and beat myself over and over again for being so mindless. However, there was something I needed to do. I don't know anything, but... this is such a mess. Sir, you're lazy, you never know what's going on, and the only thing you do is play games all day. Every time, you only rush over when a case happens and you're about to die, and all you do is talk about magecraft nonsense, and you start fights with mages all the time, even though you're weaker than all of them.
Lady...
My mentor's confused voice gradually faded away. I was already stupid, so just thinking of the right words already took everything I had. There was one thing carved into my heart. Even though I had thousands of things I wanted to say, all of them refused to become coherent sentences. But, sir, I don't think you were given anything just because you're lucky. I don't think so at all. Mr. Atram and Miss Luvia only gave you things because of who you are, because of the encounters that have taken place, because because that's why they've entrusted you with these things. It doesn't make sense if it's only because of luck." Those words were not meant for me to say. I had only known my mentor for less than a year. We had met in my hometown. I had become his student in London, and we had experienced multiple incidents together. That was all. Other than me being presumptuous, what else would this be? The title of disciple didn't mean anything. It was just there to be more convenient. I was the only one who assumed it was more than that. Though I knew all of this, I couldn't stop. I want you to be happy, sir." How terrifying. It was the same kind of fear as the sort that would appear when I saw a spirit. I was terrified of hearing my mentor's response, terrified of having him scold me. I was scared, so afraid. I wanted to disappear. He did not respond. It was as if someone had thrown a bucket of cold water at me. Everything was suddenly ice cold. I didn't have the courage to look up anymore. Even though I needed to take responsibility for my own selfish actions, I couldn't make myself. But I also had no desire to run from this place anymore. Had my mentor been battling these same insecurities all along? I felt something. My mentor's hand touched my shoulder. It was a gentle, shaky touch, and his hand shook, but I could still feel warmth and power in it.
You're right, lady.
"Sir?"
I'm still so immature. I haven't changed at all.
A wry smile appeared on his tired face.
You're right. I've forgotten the promise that I made.
With a somewhat embarrassed expression, he sat back onto the sofa and put a hand to his stomach. From there, a strange noise rang out.
Apologies, but could you help me prepare some food? I don't think I can stand up like this. I forgot that I haven't eaten for an entire day.
As he said this, my mentor smiled again.
Wow. Aye.
You don't have to call me useless. I know that better than anyone else.
Sorry then.
Hearing Ad's voice come from the hook at my right shoulder made me so happy I almost wanted to cry again. I'll get something right now. Wiping my tears, I turned around and ran through the corridors. My heart was thumping noisily. Everything I had just done was so embarrassing. My ears were probably still bright red. Even so, I was elated. That was why I missed the hidden emotions in that voice.
That's great, isn't it, Idiot Gray?
Worried there was a shadow lurking inside those rare words of comfort.
Brother?
Upon opening the door, I heard Raines's ecstatic voice. We were in her private room at Slur Street. Similar to my mentor's office, the room was fancier than the rest of the buildings here. However, now was not a time to think about that.
Have you done research for the grand role?
Of course.
Raines nodded, still surprised. She had heard about what happened at Heartless Workshop, so her reaction was as expected. I was also in a state of confusion, because I was happy about the change in events.
I have something I want to discuss with you.
Worried, sure? But are you all right?
My mentor continued to eat his sandwich. I stood behind my mentor with a platter of tea. I had borrowed the kitchen in the student cafeteria for a while and made a beef sandwich, even though it wasn't a meal.
Who knows? I still want to run away from everything, but I've thought that ever since you made me a lord.
What a terrible way to greet your little sister, I see. I'm incredibly busy, but I'll give priority to my dear brother's request.
Ryams looked up at my mentor with her patronizing, flame-colored eyes.
Are you sure you're all right? I've already considered what would happen if you decided to retire here, or even side with Heartless. You're not planning on doing the latter, are you?
She wasn't just asking because they were siblings. As the heir, she was asking about my mentor's plans for the future of the El-Melloi faction. I thought without realizing it. Maybe I was being affected by all the scheming that had surrounded me in the past few days.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that helping Heartless is wrong. Depending on the situation, we could still secure a victory even if we submitted to Heartless.
Rhinus' opinions were no more than calculations. Otherwise, a teenager wouldn't have been able to sustain the El-Melloi faction. No, before my mentor became a lord, she was less than 10 years old. Only now did I begin to understand what it must have felt like to live in the constant fear of assassination and betrayal.
I don't plan on doing that.
Good, good.
I'm neutral, Rhaenys smiled again. Then she laced her fingers together as if she was going to pull a trick.
In that case, what have you come here for, my lord?
I want to talk about what Tuko Oyozaki said about the corpse from the secret autopsy division.
Okay.
3 out of Heartless 5 students have gone missing. One of the 2 left was found dead yesterday at the secret autopsy division. The last person, Ashara, has gone into hiding. We met her at the secret autopsy division, and she seems to agree with Caliph Ithred in thinking that the culprit is Heartless.
Yes, that makes sense.
Hashia Mestos was the dark-skinned woman we had met at the secret autopsy division.
She didn't say anything when we said that Heartless's students had gone missing. Considering that Kaluk was considering using monsters from Spirit Tomb Albion to stop Heartless, she should also have prepared something. Of course, it's possible that she has already been captured by Heartless.
Heartless students. They were my upperclassmen in the Department of Modern Magecraft, as well as survivors of the labyrinth. These were their names. Caliph Ithred, of the Management Branch of the Secret Autopsy Division. Ashara Mistress, of the Materials Branch of the Secret Autopsy Division. Jorik Cadiz, Freelancer, Kalav's brother. Giselle Tolman, Freelancer, Potions Expert. Kuru, Freelancer, probably.
My apologies.
My mentor reached into his pocket and took out a cigar. He cut off its tip and then slowly lit it with a match. After the fire was transferred to the tip of the cigar, my mentor put it in his mouth. His movements felt so familiar to me, and the smell was somewhat calming.
I know a little about the magecraft side of things, but this is based upon the schemes that are commonplace in the clock tower. I'll need to borrow your knowledge for a moment.
Please don't put it as if your dear little sister is full of ill intent.
My mentor noticed what she was implying and continued as he gazed up at the swirling puffs of smoke.
Right now, we need to figure out why Tuko Adzaki emphasized the importance of that corpse. In other words, the reason why Kaluf Ithred died there.
The reason? I was still confused. I wasn't confused about Heartless suddenly going after his students. That, at least, I could understand. Perhaps because he saw my perplexed expression, my mentor elaborated on his statement.
He has a brother, doesn't he?
Yes, I think his name is Jorik Cadiz.
They had different last names because he had been adopted into a famous mage bloodline.
Exactly, Kaluf said his brother was adopted into a different family and changed his last name as a result. But what if it was the other way around?
The other way around?
One brother went to the secret autopsy division, while the other changed his last name after becoming the adoptive son of a local family. What if they separated out of necessity?
What? Even after he explained, I still didn't understand. Seeing my increased confusion, my mentor tried to phrase it in a different way.
Apparently, Jorik and Kalov were alike in both age and appearance. What if they routinely switched places?
Jorik and Kalov? I had no idea what my mentor was talking about. However, I started to shiver as if someone had dumped a bucket of cold water over my head. I still couldn't understand anything, but I felt like my mentor was about to reach something important. Maybe he hadn't stabbed a knife into the heart of the mystery yet, but the blade had struck a critical area. Why would they do that?
The secret autopsy division has access to information that is not available elsewhere. They even have all sorts of safety measures in place to prevent its members from simply leaking it. For that reason, the 2 brothers decided to go excavate in Spirit Tomb Albion so they could create an opportunity for them to infiltrate the secret autopsy division. It might seem like a roundabout method, but it's all because survivors are most likely to be recruited.
My mentor said many things that I could only understand the superficial meaning of. Title cast by Our Tale Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening.
Analytical, that is also part of the reason why Yorick was adopted and changed his last name. That was so it wouldn't be as easy to discern their relationship. Even with the clock tower safety measures in place, the brothers would be hard to differentiate if they used a similar type of magecraft. And even first-year New Agers know how to use magecraft to make two siblings' faces identical.
Interesting. I see. It's the same technique that comes up in mystery novels, isn't it? We've done something similar before as well.
At the Twin Towers of Il-Melloi. During the incident at the Twin Towers of Il-Melloi, they had created confusion by transfiguring someone to look identical to the victim. Of course, that degree of transfiguration magecraft could not be achieved by regular mages. For brothers, however, it was as easy as using magecraft to apply the tiniest bit of makeup. But would that be worth the effort?
It would be worth an immeasurable amount of things. The Secret Autopsy Division has a very strict set of rules in place to prevent disclosure, because smuggling is far too profitable. However, if someone prepared another identity and alibi, there are multiple ways to get away.
And that's silent? A conspiracy from a decade ago was unraveled by my mentor's hands. It was a dissection of mystery that was both similar and different from the detectives from mystery novels.
That explains how Heartless was able to enter the building without being detected by any bounded fields. If the brothers switched places regularly, there must be some way to dodge the safety measures. Heartless knew how to exploit it because he had already captured the other brother. We have already witnessed how skilled Heartless is at disguising himself.
Heartless had transformed himself into Calls. Though I hadn't known Calls for a very long time, Heartless's imitation was accurate enough to fool us for a period of time. Back then, Heartless had perfectly traced everything about Calls, from his appearance to his speaking and thinking style.
Analytical under those circumstances, Faker should be able to pass without incident as long as she shifts into spirit form. Of course, bounded fields react to spirit entities as well, but most modern mages won't be prepared for dangerous familiars that can shift between multiple states of being. On top of that, Khaluf has already found a way to bypass the rules, making it even easier for Heartless. Khaluf also attempted to fight back using monsters from Spirit Tomb Albion, possibly because he was alerted of Heartless by his brother's disappearance. Unfortunately, though, it wasn't enough to defeat Faker.
At this, my mentor paused for a moment, before he continued in a disgusted voice.
Maybe it wasn't Khaluf, but Jorek.
Huh?
Questioning the corpse we saw at the Secret Autopsy Division. What if they found out that it didn't belong to Khaluf?
I thought back to that mutilated corpse. With Faker's magecraft, it must not have been hard to create something like that. It probably only took a word or two from her to make a human being look like they had been placed in a giant blender. But why would they do that? In other words, what was the wide unit? What if the corpse wasn't Khaluf's? So, does that mean it belonged to his brother, Mr. Jorek?
If that is the case, the Secret Autopsy Division could have realized it long ago. Of course, a murder happening inside the facilities is a serious affair, but if they discover that the victim isn't one of their members, they will turn to finding the victim's true identity. What if Heartless considered that to be a grave mistake?
His words gradually started becoming fuzzy in my mind. What was my mentor trying to decipher? What was he trying to reveal?
That is why Heartless chose to completely destroy the body. He wanted to conceal the identity of the corpse. It would be optimal to take the entire corpse away, but the security measures in the Secret Autopsy Division would not have allowed for that.
I understand that it's possible that Mr. Jorek and Mr. Jorek secretly switched places, and that it's worthwhile to infiltrate the Secret Autopsy Division. But when did it start?
When did it start?
The person who repeated what I said was not my mentor. Instead, it was Rhines, narrowing her eyes and pressing her fingers to her temples.
Oh, now I get it. I understand why you came to ask me. So that's what it is.
Exactly.
Seemed to understand something that I did not.
It isn't just Khaluf and Jorek. Heartless's 5 students might have had other goals from the very start. In this case, they probably had these goals long before they became Heartless's students.
Huh? Long before they became Heartless students? Seeing my confusion, Rhaenys drank some tea from the cup beside her. But that's strange, isn't it? Heartless's students are all survivors, right? I can understand it if it's just Mr. Clough and Mr. Jurek, but the others have all been trapped in Spirit 2 Albion for years. How could they all have plans from before that? It didn't make sense. Of course this seemed to make sense, with an emphasis on the word seem. Filling in one hole only made another one. Like my mentor had said, Caliph and Jorik may have gone into Albion because they conspired to infiltrate the secret autopsy division, but that didn't mean that everyone had a motive like that, did it?
I've done some research too. Jorik and Caliph were down there for 4 years. Giselle was there for 9, while Ashara and Karu were basically born there. Besides, that team has undergone multiple changes before it settled on its final state. Gray's question makes perfect sense.
Her reply made me breathe a small sigh of relief. I knew my thoughts were shallow, but I still wanted to understand their thoughts.
However, Gray, the clock tower has already provided an incredibly simple answer. That's why you came here to confirm this with me, right, brother dear? Even reasonable guesses are meaningless if they're nothing more than unfounded theories. It's not a question of whether the culprit is smart or what influenced his actions. Rather, it's about whether or not the right environment is available. My brother was hinting at a possibility that is much worse than you think. It's horrible. No, worse than horrible. I suspect that you might become disillusioned once you realize the true nature of the clock tower. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
What do you mean?
It's wrong to assume that Caliph and Jorik are the only ones thinking of something like that. Who knows whether they really were freelancers before they went into Albion? Nothing is too much in order to obtain information from the secret autopsy division. It's more natural to think that another organization that wants that kind of information ordered the brothers to spy on them. I think it's in danger that Caliph and Jorik are the only ones up to something shifty. It takes a considerable amount of skill to survive there. It would be terrible if they died in Spirit 2 Albion. Even worse if they were discovered by the secret autopsy division before they could provide anything useful.
Raina's voice slid over the floor of the office. A hypothesis more terrifying than what I thought was gradually emerging.
In other words, there were probably dozens, maybe even more spies sent to Spirit 2 Albion by a faction in the clock tower.
What?
Matter of fact, it's more than just probable, I can almost make sure of it. Entering Albion the proper way requires permission from the secret autopsy division. The range of their investigation will also be limited, so it's perfectly natural for them to send spies down there, isn't it? Even though it might take a decade or two, maybe even a lifetime.
I couldn't immediately accept what was so perfectly natural about this. Indeed, it might seem reasonable to Rains. If there was a low rate of success, all they needed to do was send dozens of spies. As long as one person managed to succeed, the results would be the same. The people who were thrown away in the process didn't matter. However,
Head of Heartless's students, Caliph and Jorik, were definitely spies. Maybe there were other students like them too.
shocked, I listened in shock. I felt as if someone was holding a hand to my neck, as I floundered about, gasping for air but failing to breathe.
All of that is to say that the possibility exists, right, Rhaenys?
Yes, it makes more sense that way. The El-Melloi faction never cared much about Spirit 2 Albion before our decline, so it's an oversight on my part. I wish I'd paid more attention. I don't know when this kind of infiltration started, and the scale is far larger than I could have imagined.
W8. Did all of them just go along with their orders? That's more than just dangerous. If they don't finish their tasks, they won't be able to leave. That means they might be stuck there for their entire lives. What were these people thinking? What kind of tyrannical person would command others to do something that could take an entire lifetime?
They would just accept it. Mages always belong to families. These families could be in danger of disappearing if they didn't do anything about it in this age. Branch families of the 3 great families won't hesitate to sell the children they don't need if they see an opportunity like this. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive in the clock tower. It's not strange at all for them to say things like, if you wait in Albion for a couple of decades, you might get to give orders to your younger relatives once they go as well. Branch families that have fallen into obscurity often devolve into this state.
There was an undeniable truth inside the young woman's words. Maybe she was like that as well. Within the El-Melloi faction, Ryans came from an extremely insignificant branch family. However, she had been pressed into the role of the heir because she was compatible with the magic crest. She didn't become who she was out of choice. No such freedom existed. There was nothing Rains could do about the plots and schemes that surrounded her. In the end, she had survived because she was uniquely skilled at this. But she had never wished for it to be this way. Was that how it usually was? Did the clock tower really sacrifice human lives without a second thought, or were mages just that twisted? So, is it the same for Mrs. Shara and Mr. Carew?
As I said earlier, it's very possible. Even though they were born in Albion, that doesn't mean they were free from all the scheming.
That's the... I stopped before I finished my sentence. What I said next was a familiar word. White unit. Hearing my words, my mentor nodded.
And that's how it happened. Now the only thing we have left is to throw up our hands and surrender. So that's why Tuko Ozaki asked Heartless whose students his students were. Damn it, I should have realized.
Rhinus had told us that Tuko had asked that question, so that was the answer. It wasn't some kind of riddle. The question meant exactly what it seemed to mean.
In that case, the disappearances mean something completely different. What if it wasn't a warning to the students themselves, but to the people behind them?
A warning?
Heartless was operating secretly up until that murder.
Had said something similar in his office. Frustrated, Rhinus clicked her tongue and crossed her arms with an expression full of regret.
Analytical. Yes, precisely. This way he was able to influence things without leaving any evidence behind. Making related people disappear is quite a clever strategy. It happens a lot in organized crime, doesn't it? No, wait. If that's the case, what about this attack?
If he simply wanted to get to Albion, he would only have needed to take the elevator down after killing Kalof at the secret autopsy division. Of course, it's possible that the security measures would render that option unviable. He probably caused a series of incidents out of the same considerations. From Heartless' perspective, attacking Slur Street is almost too ideal. As a way of bringing an end to the serial disappearances, it simultaneously brings him to Albion and pressures the people behind the students.
I could understand this, considering that Heartless used to be the head of the Department of Modern Magecraft. He was probably accustomed to such absurdities. To me, however, these conspiracies were more terrifying than the battles I had fought in up until this point. In a certain sense, it was even harder to accept than mages from the Age of the Gods and the 7 superweapons of the Atlas Institute. These people used others' lives, livelihoods, and futures as pieces on a chessboard. There was nothing but pure malice in that act. Realius had said before that the clock tower was a melting pot full of schemes. But I had never imagined what living life saturated in it was really like. Now I finally understood a small corner of it. It was already enough to make me shiver with fear.
Do you hate me now?
Sincere? No. No. I don't. I'll never hate you, Rains,
Good.
she replied, finishing her cup of now cold tea with a single gulp. Her pale fingers quivered slightly. Then she took out a coin from the drawers inside the table.
Oh, right. I forgot to give this to you.
The face that had been impressed on one side reminded me of an antique. A gold coin?
Questioning, it fell from Baker's chariot after the fight underground. Do you know what this is?
Let me take a look.
Putting on his gloves. My mentor stared intently at the gold coin.
It's a gold stater of Iskandar.
A golden coin of...
Passionate in the area around ancient Greece, coins were often minted with the designs of kings or heroes. Iskandar was a very well-liked ruler, so the coins were probably worth a significant amount.
Even at a time like this, his words still seemed to be full of praise. I found this sort of endearing. It was quite evident where the compass in his heart pointed.
Enthusiastic because of his overwhelming popularity, there are many different types of them. Most of them are based on the ancient coins that depicted Heracles, except with Iskandar's face and others depict him with horns of the god Ammon, who some claimed Iskandar to have been a reincarnation of. Others still depicted him with elephants that signified chariots. They were circulated for more than 2 centuries across a surprisingly large area for the time. The coins alone are a testament to how much he was admired as a great hero.
course you know all this. But do you know why Faker has this coin? Though I suppose it could just be one of her belongings. Maybe it doesn't have any meaning to it?
I'm not sure yet. Can I keep this for now?
My mentor carefully wrapped it in a handkerchief and put it in his pocket. Then, he put the cigar in his mouth back into its case.
Grateful either way, thank you. There are still many unanswered questions, but now I have a general grasp on the situation.
Do you have any thoughts on how to...
Huh. I don't know whether that can happen, but at least we have a general direction to investigate thanks to Atram Galliasta's letter. That's why I'll be away from Slur Street for a while. It will take more than half a day just to get here and back. So if anything comes up in the meantime, it will be up to you.
What? Wait a minute. The grand roll happens tomorrow night. What if something happens?
I'll be back before then. If anything happens to me, you'll have to take my place at the Grand Roll. You are the original successor, after all. No one will mind.
I do. I mind.
As Rains uttered her sorrowful cries, my mentor and I walked out of the room. Midway, I stopped.
Please come with me, Gray.
That alone filled my heart with gratitude, and I stepped forward in larger strides than usual. Yes, sir. Means Chapter 3.
To Olga Marie El-Melloi, going to London was like going to a foreign country. Her family, the Animospheres, didn't reside in the cities. Instead, they constructed their domains in the mountains and highlands. Sometimes, they would come down from them to stay in contact with the clock tower. But they never did unless they needed to. Nothing about this city felt familiar to her. Not the excessive number of people, the overly crowded buildings, nor the horse carriage that she had been on for an entire day. However, it would also be wrong to say that she felt a sense of familiarity when she was at home. Mossbury, her father and the current lord, hadly left his own workshop. They could only meet several times a year. So, from her perspective, people were solitary creatures. Since they were selected to be mages, they needed to hold themselves higher than everybody else. She needed to accept this. As long as she didn't expect anything of her father, she could get used to this. She had gotten too close to Rainey El-Melloi because she had shallowly thought that they were in similar positions. This kind of flimsy link meant nothing in the clock tower, but she could not resist the urge to talk a little more with Rains. That was why the attack on Slur Street had left quite a large effect on her. What happened? She had met Dr. Tishia, heartless once before on the rail Zeppelin. Olga Marie had witnessed his servant's noble phantasm. With a noble phantasm like that, trampling an entire district would undoubtedly be an easy task. However, she couldn't think of why that mage would want to attack Slur Street at this time. Of course, Olga Marie didn't know any of Heartless's goals. If Heartless wanted to use his servant to attack, he could do so at any time. What was his motive? Why did it? But choosing to appear right before the grand roll. Suspicious? Would my father know? Warsbury had once commissioned Heartless to investigate the Fourth Holy Grail War, a task that couldn't just be handed to anyone. The two had some kind of special relationship, perhaps, because they had simply met each other, or because they were both heads of departments in the clock tower. Perhaps, even though she didn't want to think about this possibility, they still were in contact with each other today. She could not help but suspect that one of Heartless and her father's schemes had led to her being sent in place of a lord.
Is anything the matter?
There was the unmistakable poison of the clock tower hidden in that smile. Olga Mary wasn't quite stupid enough to miss what was hidden beneath those glasses. Her life might actually be easier if she was, though. Composed, nothing. I was just...
Polite is that so? Remember to take care of yourself, Miss Olga Marie.
Dressed in the traditional clothing of the Far East, Hishiri was a mage Olga Marie had met on the rail Zeppelin. She had been the one who had just told Olga Marie about the attack on Slur Street.
Is everyone from the Department of Law like you?
Are you interested in this? You might become my junior one day. You know, Miss Olga Marie.
The smile on her ruby lips widened.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure either. I was recommended as an adopted child of the Norwich family, so my situation is a bit different from the other students. Some of my juniors have gotten in by being gilded with money, but I don't imagine that they are the majority. If you want to come, I'm sure you'll be an outstanding student.
Successors to families with decent amounts of power usually chose the Department of Law. The easiest way to understand the inner workings of the clock tower was to be there. That was why it was common for people to pay their way in. But the fact that these people didn't constitute the majority goes to show something. They were currently in a corner of London, in a mansion concealed by a forest. There was another person with them, an old man who was as fragile as a dry twig. He was the owner of this mansion. Many gemstones adorned his chest and hands. However, rather than looking luxurious, they made him look like a lonely corpse. It was Lord Eliphas Ruflius Nuardari Eliphas. Within the aristocratic faction, he stood for conservation and tradition.
Leave, lapdog of the Department of Law.
How unfortunate! Here I was thinking that the Department of Spiritual Evocation didn't hate me yet.
The El-Melloi, our king. This has remained for millennia and will continue to be the case, but we have no reason to have a liking for the Department of Law, even though your department knew of the existence of ghost liners. You chose to stay silent.
We have an obligation to keep certain things secret. I have also been asked to present this letter to you.
Observant at this, the female mage left the room. After a while the old man looked up, and the letter floated upward, along his line of sight. This was the poltergeist phenomenon. Rather than taking the effort to move his fingers, it was easier to use the spirits around him. This power came from the magic crest that the old man had inherited. Or maybe it came from the abilities of one of the many jewels around him, but Olga Marie could not understand that much. After reading the contents of the letter, Ruflius clicked his tongue, displeased.
Questioning, what does it say, Mr. Ruflius?
Displeased in the name of the late Lord El-Melloi, we should reject the plan to redevelop Albion and such. Of course we should. Have they come to confirm it? I have predicted this, but there must be some other reason.
The El-Mellois were the family at the top of the aristocratic faction. Apart from the director who hardly ever appeared, they were the ones in charge of the clock tower and the Department of Law. It appeared that, as Olga Marie had predicted, they had not ignored the grand role even though they decided not to attend.
Questioning, should we prevent the redevelopment of Albion? Will the redevelopment bring great benefits to the world of magecraft like Lord Trambolio claims?
Condescending, you don't understand. Animosphere girl, there does not need to be a reason. We do not need to act. According to Lord Trambolio's claims, regardless of whether or not it will bring benefits to the world of magecraft, those who can reach it will reach it. Those who cannot will not. That is all it comes down to in the end.
It was precisely because he was an aristocratic lord that he was able to conclude this. This was the power of the chosen ones, a dead end that no one beside them could possess. This was the nature of a mage. The democratic faction only slightly eased the process of selection. In essence, they were the same. What prevailed in the world of magecraft was deep-rooted inequality, the illusion of superhumanity, and a sense of oppression that did not fit in with the rest of the world. Olga Marie did not think that this nature would change until the end of the world.
And, bitter now, it is up to that fledgling lord of the Department of Modern Magecraft.
Observant no bad, but cut in before he could continue. But there will be mages after us. Shouldn't we consider the future of the world of magecraft for their sake? Mr. Ruflius, you have a successor, Mr. Brusendo. Brim too, right?
Bram, you say? Cackle, like I said. Those who can reach it will do so. The same applies for Bran. If he is capable, he shall. If not, he shall not. Either way, he will end up better than his dead sister.
Do you mean Miss Sola UI?
Like I said to that El-Melloi, I do not care what happens to Sola UI. That child is only a spare. Since my son has already grown up, Sola UI cannot become the successor anymore. Her job is already complete.
Are you?
10 years ago, The then Lord El-Melloi of the Department of Mineralogy Tekisha agreed to marry Ruflias's daughter. That would have been like a gear to unite the splintering aristocratic faction. Though it was one of the innumerable political marriages that had happened, it would undoubtedly affect the world of magecraft. However, the marriage never happened. Olga Marie only knew the final result.
The matter with Kenneth was very unfortunate, although I do not know what kind of mystery he was working on then.
He was quite an accomplished person, wasn't he? It all happened when I was an infant, so I don't understand much.
As a researcher, yes.
Analytical. What Ruflius muttered was probably the truth. The former Lord El-Melloi was a first-rate researcher. However, he was no fighter. That was why he lost in the Fourth Holy Grail War.
Mages should be this way, though the clock tower rewards those who contribute to the study of combat. Mages should not pursue such impurities. Perhaps some could, but not him.
Observant Olga Mary couldn't help but imagine that this old man also had dreams which were outside of his reach. He probably wanted to entrust this dream to someone else so they could reach it in his stead.
Scheming no matter what happens. I have already prepared for the grand role.
Theowind. Olga Mary was silent. Steams were everywhere in the clock tower. There were not many people alive that knew this fact better than Ruflius. He had probably fought in countless battles that this girl from the mountains could not even imagine. Perhaps those words were a preventative measure of sorts. Maybe he was making things up to manipulate the young daughter of the Lord of Astromancy. It doesn't matter. I'll keep doing what I have to do. He couldn't help but think back to what had happened on the Rail Zeppelin. If the incident had not occurred, her life would be so different. She wouldn't have lost Trisha or known her true intentions. Get it together, Marie. That sentence still remained in her heart. Trisha had said it to Olga Marie ever since she was a child. As if she had tripped and fallen, her world had changed dramatically. It was only two stones hitting each other, but the chain reaction had caused a massive shockwave. For the first time in her life, Olga Marie had intervened slightly of her own accord in this world, which had been overwhelmingly transformed. Part of this was cooperating with Rains to gather information. Though Olga Marie didn't trust her unilaterally, she believed that nothing would change if she didn't take action. What is he trying to do? She was wondering about the other person who had given her the opportunity to stay by the words of her governess on the Rail Zeppelin. The young, unpleasant lord, he should be a part of the aristocratic faction.
At this, she heard someone suddenly call out her name.
Olga Marie Asmolade Animosphere.
Yes.
Determined,
The girl managed to meet his vacant, emotionless eyes. It was not because she carried the burden of the Animosphere name. Rather, Olga Marie knew that if she avoided them, she would be a disappointment to her governess.
Mysterious, there is something else on the letter. It tells me to keep an eye on the air of the Animospheres, and to enlighten her if necessary.
Sorry? Olga Marie suddenly tensed up. To keep an eye on her, and then to enlighten her, he said. What did that mean? Since he told her, did that mean she passed? Or would he leave in disappointment like her father?
Commanding, just follow me.
Mysterious, the old man said, picking up his cane and turning around. Olga Marie hurriedly followed after him as he walked out of the door and through a hallway. Though it was a spacious hallway, there wasn't a single other person inside the mansion. At least 5 or 6 servants would be required to maintain a house like this, but there wasn't a trace of them to be found. It had been 3 days since Olga Marie had been brought to this mansion. During this time, she had not seen anyone but Ruflius. Eerie, they walked down the spiral staircase, across the main hall lit by a dejected chandelier, and through a hallway that became narrower and narrower. They passed through 2 doors. Olga Marie saw something that made her eyes widen in surprise. In the darkness, there was a staircase downward beside her feet.
Why is there a set of stairs here? Has it always been here? But some kind of concealment magecraft had been cast over it. In that case, it must have been something too advanced for her to detect.
The informative, the underground section of the clock tower is sometimes called the true clock tower. Compared to Spiritum Albion, however, it is only the surface. Nowadays, There are more facilities above ground than below, but the clock tower's true form is still underground. There are many hidden libraries there.
Olga Marie followed behind him, listening to the knocking of his cane against the stone. It sounded like an incantation being recited. Her father had taught her that certain types of magecraft did utilize this technique. The staircase was quite long. At the end, there was a rusted metal gate. The old man knocked his cane on the ground twice, and the door opened by itself. Eerie, the cloud of dust that greeted them made Olga Marie cover her mouth. There was a strong scent of mold. This place had probably been treated to protect what was inside it, but nothing could defeat the effects of time. Or maybe the smell was the result of some kind of magecraft. With her strengthened vision, Olga Marie could discern what the room contained. There were rows of bookshelves there, far more than there would be in a regular library.
Wow!
One of the many underground storerooms of the clock tower used to contain special books.
Eerie, there was a white figure standing deep inside the room. Someone not familiar with magecraft would probably scream at the sight, for a skeleton was standing right next to the old man. Olga Marie believed that it was a skeleton soldier. It made perfect sense that they would select a non-human guard who did not need to sleep or rest to guard this place. At the same time, it was the best proof that this room belonged to Refleus, the lord of the Department of Spiritual Evocation, El-Melloi V.
This is the treasure of the aristocratic faction. Usually it is only shown to lords, but it is a special time. So you have been given permission.
Aristocratic lords! Then, has Lord El-Melloi II been here?
The old man sighed, as if he had been caught off guard.
Of course not. Rains would be fine. El-Melloi blood flows in her veins. But a lowly new Aga, even if he has a little talent and was even promoted to the rank of Fez, of course he would not be brought here.
Just like last time, he believed there was a strong disparity. However, Olga Marie did not completely disagree. Since she had grown up in such an environment, perhaps it would affect her children and grandchildren as well. Swallowing the slight bitterness that was rising up her throat, the girl turned to ask the old man something else. Questioning, what is this library for?
And dismissive research, of course. What else?
The old man indicated for the skeleton soldier to lead the way, and it began to walk forward. Much like the records of the Atlas Institute, this skeleton soldier probably knew every detail about this library. It traversed the rows of bookshelves without any hesitation and led the way for them, which was remarkable, even though it made perfect sense. As they walked, blue fires ignited on the walls beside them, as if they were welcoming the arrival of their long-awaited master.
I never thought that I would hear the term ghost liner like this, nor have I thought that it would appear here in London. Have you heard anything from Marsbury?
Cautious, my father hasn't said anything to me. Technically, Olga Marie had met the ghost liner. She'd even fought with the servant. However, she didn't think she needed to bring that up now. Questioning, is there any information related to my father?
No, Hainath might know.
What do you mean by that?
Just as she asked that, the skeleton soldier stopped walking. There was something impossible to put into words here, in what could be called a forest of bookshelves. It wasn't just magical energy. Rather, it was more like a rich concentration of history. None of the books were printed. Instead, they had all been written by hand.
This one.
The book that the old man took out had a cover of dust that was thinner than the rest. He dusted the book off, revealing a name.
Zolgan!
An informative Makiri Zolgan.
It was a name that she did not recognize. Judging from the pronunciation, it was probably a Northern or Eastern European name. Olga Marie thought of the cold, dark countries of the north. The people who lived in such harsh conditions must have been able to dispel harsh, terrifying blizzards to have clear minds.
These are the records of a mysterious dreamer from centuries ago, a mage who was investigated by the clock tower.
It took around 2 hours to get there by bus and tram. The scenery became completely different as we arrived. The streets not only became narrower, but also seemed to be smothered by grassy fields and forests. My mentor and I got off the bus there. After examining a map for a while, we walked for around 10 minutes before we arrived at our destination. After taking briefly with the sleepy old woman at the front desk, she immediately led us into the outpatient section. We entered a sunlit white hospital room with the tingling smell of disinfectant. Perhaps because there were no patients today, or because they were on lunch break, there wasn't a nurse in sight. There was soft classical music playing in the room, possibly because it suited the owner's tastes. Not long after, the person we were here to meet appeared.
Friend Leo. Hello. Are you the visitor they spoke of?
Observant, it was a doctor of around 60. Half of his hair had already gone white, and a pair of glasses hung from the front pocket of his white coat.
Polite nice to meet you, Mr. Gurrow.
After shaking his hand, the doctor sat in his chair.
Questioning. Did you come especially from London to interview me?
No.
Then why are you here?
Observant seeing a frown appear on the doctor's face, my mentor smiled warmly and responded with something strange.
We've been close friends for years now. I just came to have a chat with you because I haven't seen you for a while.
Of course, this was the first time my mentor had seen him. He had just greeted the doctor as if they hadn't met before. However,
Right.
my mentor put a finger to his lips.
Shh, that was suggestion, Magecraft.
A suggestion, Magecraft. Shocked, be honest, that shocked me more than the doctor's reply. My mentor analysed other people's magecraft often, but it had been such a long time since I had seen my mentor use proper magecraft.
Unhappy and fortunately, it's still just my magecraft. If anything contradictory happens, the spell will unravel immediately.
My mentor said, unhappily as if he had predicted what I wanted to say. His expression was like that of a child who had it pointed out that they were bad at a subject. The doctor sitting across from us tilted his head slightly.
As anything the matter?
No, it's all right. This is my assistant.
Is that so? So you've reached the age for that too?
Under suggestion, Magecraft, who did he think my mentor was? What kind of story would be behind a friendship like this? Maybe it would be easier to keep things consistent if the backstory was vague. Though I had attended classes on suggestion, I wasn't sure of the details.
Questioning. So as I was saying, do you remember your patients from 30 years ago?
Course I do.
Do you remember someone who now goes by Heartless?
I gasps, though I already knew what he was going to say. This is what Mr. Attram mentioned. I thought, recalling what my mentor said on the bus. Heartless has had contact with fairies in the past. Attram had written information about Dr. Darkus, Heartless, on the back of the envelope. There was more information than the back of the envelope could contain. The words had been made into a pseudo-magic formula that showed everything that Attram had discovered upon reacting with my mentor's magic circuits. Ireminiscent. In other words, it was a medium for recording magecraft, much like a compact disc. It was an idea that was typical of Attram, who was not averse to fusing magecraft with technology. Though the linden leaf was stolen from me in that auction, it has helped me realize something. He probably thought that sending several people to bid together would be enough to conceal his identity. Unfortunately for him, it is a common technique to hide oneself among the sand in the land that I hail from. We have trained our senses to be able to detect the slightest smell mixed into the wind. I mused. I felt as if I could see his smug expression, even though he wasn't here. However, we had known all of this. When Heartless had first appeared, Melvin had mentioned that there were rumours that the former head of the Department of Modern Magecraft had his heart stolen by fairies. We believed that this experience was also the source of his strange abilities. It was like the noble phantasm that I possessed. You probably know all of this by now, but the problems with changelings only appear after they return. I've heard a story about a changeling who received the blessings of the fairies after returning to reality. That person was heralded by the Mages Association as a genius before that Tupu Aozaki came. Heartless seems to have been sheltered by a doctor. This is as far as I got to as the Holy Grail War is about to begin. This was probably a natural thought from Atrim's point of view. The possibility that Heartless would become his enemy in the Holy Grail War existed, so of course he would sow this. I thought that you might be able to make something of this. This is the doctor's address, and that concludes my thanks for entertaining me. His information had ended there. That was why we had taken the bus to this hospital.
Reminiscent. I'll tell you then. Since we're such good friends. His white eyelashes fluttered as he recalled the incident. Back then, I was still a young man full of aspirations. My late father used to reprimand me for that. But that was why I stubbornly refused when my father said that patients should be sent to a hospital with more resources. I decided to let him stay here.
In his troubled tone, I thought I saw what the doctor used to be like. Committed to his dream and determined to make it a reality. Everyone probably has a phase like this.
When we first found him, he was covered with all kinds of injuries. I couldn't believe that he was still alive. His wounds healed surprisingly quickly, but we soon realized a problem.
Questioning. A problem? Was his heart missing by any chance?
The doctor was silent for a moment.
How do you know that?
I can't tell you the details, but he told me himself.
We couldn't send him to another hospital. He had a pulse, and his blood was circulating properly. But no matter what instrument we used, we couldn't locate his heart. It was almost like a dream. I recall that he would sometimes clutch at his chest as if he was in pain, like his heart had been pierced through. To think that he calls himself Heartless now.
The doctor's voice slowly swept across the room. Heartless had indeed said something about his heart having been stolen on the rail Zeppelin. It isn't exactly imaginary numbers, but I can do similar things, all in exchange for my heart. I recalled what Atrim said about the fairy's curse.
Lecturing all of this stems from changelings, also called kamikakushi.
His voice resounded across the white-tiled floor of the hospital room. Though his statement was a bit too short to be a lecture, it was still full of insight.
Informative The Tale of Urajima Taro from the Far East is a classic example of this, where the abducted person is taken to a completely different time and place. It's possible that the only beings who know where Heartless came from are the fairies that abducted him and Heartless himself.
I didn't know why, but my mentor's words reminded me of the setting sun, a time when the world is indiscriminately dyed in a single shade of orange. What had this mysterious person received in exchange for his heart? So, a fairy's real?
In Fantatory, there are familiars and phantasmal species like them. However, the existence of true fairies is still a mystery that we have not yet fully grasped. In a certain sense, it's a mystery more complex than the magecraft of the Age of the Gods. After all, it was a fairy known as the Lady of the Lake who gave King Arthur her sword, Excalibur.
The mention of that name shook me. No matter how many times I heard it, I would never forget its significance. That name was carved into my soul and had shaped my entire life.
Reminiscent. He stayed for 3 weeks. How have I almost forgotten? Yes, he disappeared after 3 weeks. He left on a cold winter morning, leaving only a neatly folded shirt behind, as if he was only an illusion.
The time frame matches up. Heartless began to be active in the clock tower several months afterward. Mr. Norwich might have heard of his experiences and decided to help him.
Mr. Norwich?
Correpta, I remember mentioning him before. Dr. Heartless is Mr. Norwich's adopted son. They call him the daddy long legs of the clock tower. He adopts and funds people who he believes are talented.
I did recall hearing this name before. His support was also the reason why the Department of Modern Magecraft was named after him. Shiria Dashino also said that he was her brother, right?
Nor Witch's adoptive children are in every department of the clock tower, including the Department of Law. However, there has never been another example of a department head without a prestigious background. Such a miracle can never happen anywhere else except in the Department of Modern Magecraft.
My mentor's words seemed to drive a nail into my heart. It could explain why the Department of Modern Magecraft was frequently underestimated, and why my mentor's position was so precarious.
Kurgent, please think about it some more. Did anything strange happen while he was here?
Strange things. Let me think.
The doctor's expression remained vacant as he looked up to the ceiling. He had asked himself how he had almost forgotten. Had the clock tower erased parts of his memory?
Frustrated a mage less terrible than me might be able to dig up his memories, but all we can do now is hope he still remembers something.
I could see a tinge of frustration from my mentor. Would the clue that he had barely managed to catch slip from his fingers? Finally, the doctor spoke again.
Yes, I remember. Back then.
The doctor's fingers grasped at the air impatiently, as if he was trying to retrieve something that had been taken away from him. Finally, his hands came to rest over his own face.
It was a strange condition.
Questioning, do you mean that Heartless had a strange condition?
No, I did. I had a strange illness at the time. Every once in a while, everything would disappear before my eyes. I didn't just see darkness. It was more like the sense of sight had left me completely. If you think about it, people describe anything they cannot see as darkness. I only lasted for a couple of minutes, but I worried that had some kind of brain disease. Back then, I was constantly busy fighting with my father, so I didn't have it checked at another hospital. Fawn, however, he cured me with a touch. It really surprised me. I turned around then to see him smiling happily. That was the first time I saw him smile. After that, the symptoms never appeared again. We talked a lot after that. He had a good taste in books. I recommended him some science fiction novels, and he read them impressively quickly and discussed them with me. I introduced him to things like Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics and Heinlein's, works after he married for the second time. We would talk for hours without me realizing. I still distinctly remember the feeling of wanting to be an astronaut.
My mentor listened to each word as if he was trying to comprehend an oracle's enigmatic prophecy. After talking a bit more, the doctor sighed.
So, what do you think? That's all I can remember?
My mentor reached out and tapped the doctor's shoulder.
Polite, sorry to have bothered you.
Friendly, I don't mind. I'm glad I got to talk to you after so long.
Perhaps because sifting through his memory had been incredibly tiring, the doctor leaned back on his seat. The light shining through the gauzy curtains illuminated the wrinkles on his hands, the sign of the passing of time which had chiseled away at the doctor's ambitions.
Wistful. Is he living a good life now? I know it's a bit strange to be asking this after forgetting for so long, but he was a very nice man. He was suffering himself, but he still cared about me. I even joked that he could become my assistant. If he had said yes, maybe my life would have turned out differently.
I can't comment on his life as a whole. However, he has students that take his words very seriously. His motto was to dedicate your life to the most radiant thing.
Dedicate your life to the most radiant thing. That was what Khalaf had said back at the Secret Autopsy Division. However, Her love had been betrayed and murdered by Heartless. The doctor smiled faintly.
Oh, I was the one who told him that. He said he had no purpose in life, so I told him to search for something radiant to devote his life to. I believe that is what everyone should aim to do.
Perhaps this was where the most radiant thing in his eyes could be found.
You said he has students, right? Good. That makes me feel happy. Isn't it strange how many things make you feel happy once you get older?
That smile was the last thing we saw before we left the room. By the time we left the hospital, the sun had already started to set. The landscape here was different from London. There were old-fashioned buildings scattered around the landscape, and grass grew out from the sides of the pavement. All of this was being dyed crimson by the sunset. I could hear the sound of a bell tolling in the distance. It probably came from the church in the area. All the children who lived here probably used that bell as a sign for them to return home to a warm dinner, where their parents would ask them inconsequential questions about how their day has been. What was the changeling doing at this hour? Did he have a place to return to? I didn't know why, but I suddenly felt a little like crying. Did you find useful hints, sir?
Some of what he said is worth thinking about. However, no matter what hypothesis arises from this, it is only a speculation on top of a speculation. I still don't have anything reliable.
I don't mind how reliable it is. If it's all right with you, sir, could you please tell me? I didn't feel compelled to ask for an answer, but I did so anyway. I had only known my mentor for half a year, but I understood who he was. He wasn't a perfectionist, but I knew that his hypotheses were useful to me, no matter how incomplete they were.
I'm almost there. I feel like I've been chiseling at the wall of a cave. It won't be long until I reach the other side, but I don't know when it will happen.
He scratched his head in frustration as he thought.
Muttering there's only a little bit left, not until I reach the full truth, but something close to it, but the distance of one step seems too far away. No, it's all right,
He said, shaking his head. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin.
Muttering a golden stater. Like I said back at Slur Street, all sorts of coins were circulated around Greece in ancient times. Ones with Iskandar's face were especially popular. In a certain sense, his coins united cross-continental trade. Great kings like him were objects of the faith of their subjects.
Faith.
Exactly.
My mentor held the coin out and polished it with an expression of admiration. He continued speaking after examining it for a while.
Coins are one of the most ancient vessels of faith still present in the modern day. They're so ubiquitous and meaningful that I don't even need to give a lecture on the subject for you to understand.
Of course, even before the prevalence of capitalism, human societies have long since been based on faith in money. As Mr. Shaddan once said, money was the largest-scale magecraft created by humanity.
Questioning. So why would Heartless want to take it into the labyrinth?
Wait. My mentor narrowed his eyes as if he suddenly realized something.
Muttering. Why would he want to take the coin into the labyrinth?
I had unknowingly said something that seemed to be important. For a while, he continued to mutter things to himself as he ran his fingers through his long hair. Finally, he came to a revelation as he stared down at the ground.
Exactly. Isn't Spiritum Albion a labyrinth?
Well, yes? At least, I think so. That was the only thing I could come up with in response to that. Albion was a cornerstone of the Mages Association, made from the corpse of an ancient dragon that decayed away over centuries. We had established long ago that it was a labyrinth.
Lecturing, I've talked about this before, right? Labyrinths are a type of magecraft. Going through one is a type of initiation.
You mean when you told me that labyrinths and mazes are different, and that you can find another version of yourself in the deepest part of a labyrinth? I meant assent. My mentor had discussed all of this when he first told me about Albion. It had been inevitable that I would meet another version of myself in the labyrinth beneath my hometown. In order to die and to be reborn, I had had to return there. To you, your hometown was a labyrinth. Even though it had only been a couple of days, That seemed like such a long time ago. It was probably because so much had happened in this short period of time.
In that case, it's clear what Heartless is trying to do to my king. Ah, I see now. Heartless could only be trying to do one thing by taking his shadow Faker to Spirit Tomb Albion.
My mentor continued, muttering things to himself.
Frustrated. Damn it, why didn't I notice earlier? Heartless is the former head of the Department of Modern Magecraft. It goes without saying what type of magecraft he's best at. If he wants to summon Iskandar with the same field of expertise as me, he can only achieve limited things. Techniques in modern magecraft are often extremely specialized, so many components have to be pulled from beyond it, such as Emiya's magecraft. Oh, for goodness sake.
Worried clouds of anxiety seemed to gather in him, just as it had been when he first realized that Heartless wanted to summon Iskandar. As if he had just unknowingly fallen into Heartless' trap again. But what would it be like this time? Would another trap from Heartless await? Or would my mentor's deduction find me grasp onto his enemy's heart? Or, at least the void where his heart used to be.
Hey,
My mentor's shoulders began to shake, as if a sudden fire had overtaken his frail body.
that's the second Wydunit.
Hopeful, had my mentor finally reached the answer?
I know what Heartless is trying to do now.
I widened my eyes in astonishment as my mentor buried his face in his hands. It was as if his sudden revelation had actually struck him.
Muttering, but why? Why is this necessary? No, it'd certainly be the correct answer for a mage, but it shouldn't be this simple. Toko Azaki would find this answer ridiculous. We shouldn't be going after something like this. If Heartless does indeed have an accomplice in the grand role, how much do they know about his motive?
Worried this was a symptom of my mentor thinking too quickly. His mind was capable of leaving everything else in the world behind sometimes. What would happen next? Would my mentor finally be able to catch up to Heartless? Or would this finally stop him from doing so for once and for all? Sir, what is Heartless trying to do? My mentor was silent for a moment. Perhaps he was re-evaluating the answer he had reached. Or perhaps he was still hesitant to accept it.
This is purely based on my speculations. Heartless wants to use Spirit Tomb Albion to completely alter the way magecraft exists in the modern day.
Behind us, the red of the sky began to ebb away. The window of the skyscraper provided a good view of the sunset. There were hardly any other customers in the restaurant. This place was usually filled to the brim with people at this time of year for its panoramic view of the city of London. Today, however, it had been booked for a few people. Specifically, they were an old woman and a burly man, Lord Valueleta and Lord Trembelio.
The food is all right, but the chairs aren't kind to my back.
My mute is unforgiving as ever.
It was a charming smile that would make anyone who saw it wish to make him smile again. That was one of the gifts of those in positions like his. Inner Eye, however, met it with a cold response.
The problem, MacDonald, is that we have different expectations. New things are often wonderful, but real art must be accepted in the moment. This food is too tailored to people who are used to fine cuisine. It is expected that innovation in this area comes from people with enough money on their hands. But even if there is enough time on the vertical axis, there aren't enough people to experience it on the horizontal axis.
Agreeable, I agree, Lord Valolo. Do you think entertainment should be simple so everyone will be able to understand it?
Yes, that is a tenet of the Democratic faction, isn't it? Of course, the goal isn't to simply appease as many people as possible. It is meaningless to have people accept things without actually enjoying them. We do not need to blindly pander to the masses. Instead, we should aim to win over them naturally. After all, why would anyone wish to follow a king who achieves victory in a boring way?
Mused again, I must say, as unforgiving as ever. I think the public needs enlightenment. What do you think, Melvin Kuhn? What do you think, Melvin Kuhn?
I'm quite satisfied. I thought the idea of pairing fig mousse with grilled scallops was absolutely wonderful.
Even the sickly tuna stayed silent, as the two lords conversed.
If you don't mind, I'm going to bring out the whiskey that I brought.
Of course, please feel free to do so, Lord.
Also, no one else is here. Just call me Mrs. Inouye like you used to, even though it's a bit disgusting.
My apologies, then, Mrs. Inouye. What do you think about duels between mages?
I don't have an opinion on them. The clock tower encourages it as if we still live in medieval times.
The old woman said, as she tilted her glass of Islay malt whisky, produced in the Hebrides Islands to the west of Scotland. It was her favourite drink.
I think it is very meaningful, even more so when you consider the new Agers. Maybe they have talents that can only be honed through competition.
Skeptical. Does that justify murder, especially since mages are already an endangered species?
MacDonald leaned forward, his body resembling a marble statue.
It's been 40 years, hasn't it?
Scoffing risking your life for no reason, are you? Don't tell me you think the grand role just a good stage for an unobstructed duel.
Observant, MacDonald laughed a little. This time, it was Inouye's turn to change the subject.
I heard that Dr. Heartless attacked Slur Street. To put it plainly, it's a warning to pressure his opponent as the grand role looms over the horizon.
Though the time and place were far apart, the old woman arrived at the same conclusion as Lord El-Melloi II. That was the reason why Heartless had decided to emerge from hiding to flamboyantly attack the home of the Department of Modern Magecraft.
There must be someone after Heartless. Unfortunately, I don't know why he suddenly resigned his post as the head of the Department of Modern Magecraft 10 years ago, but it would make sense if someone was chasing him. Does the Valawaleta faction have any ideas regarding it?
Who knows? But you understand, right? Heartless used a portal beneath Slur Street to go to Spirit Tomb Albion, and the grand role will be held in the deepest part of Spirit Tomb Albion, the ancient heart.
Intrigue!
She was right. The Grand Rule was no simple meeting about the mundane operation of the clock tower. Though it might have fallen to that level in recent years, the Grand Rule of the past was an elaborate ritual held in a section of Spirit Tomb Albion, infinitely close the inner sea of the planet.
Son, you said that the redevelopment of Albion is meaningful. The Democratic faction agrees with you in that.
MacDonald had said this during their discussion with Lord El-Melloi II. It was also why he proposed the Grand Role.
Demanding in that case. It's time for us to go over the relevant information to support that claim, isn't it?
Back agreeable, I see.
With a twirl of his hand, the angelic puppets waiting beside the table spread their wings and dove over the it before gently landing and turning into a stack of books with a puff of smoke. Though the performance had been planned extensively, the Inouye accepted it without batting an eye. However, as she flipped through the pages, she froze.
Son, is this from the Secret Autopsy Division?
Ah! I removed the most revealing parts, but that isn't enough to fool you, is it?
Suspicious don't play dumb. Where did you get this from? I don't believe it would be so easy to obtain, even with the power of the Trambellios.
The Secret Autopsy Division had basically been granted complete freedom within the clock tower. Even the great family at the top of the Democratic faction wouldn't be able to easily access its confidential information.
What matters is that it backs up what I said earlier. What matters is that it backs up what I said earlier.
I see. This report details all kinds of details that cannot be found above the surface, even down to specific mining sites. The amount of excavation around the mining city have decreased drastically, but they have remained the same in the Great Magic Circuit. In other words, you're saying that if we redevelop Spirit Tomb Albion and establish a route directly to the Great Magic Circuit, we will be able to attain the same amounts as in the 19th century.
She was so used to this that she could check it with her magic circuits alone. That was one of the reasons why some mages still ridiculed the advance of technology in this day and age. However, the accuracy and efficiency of this technique varied based on the talent of the user.
But how am I meant to trust unsourced information? Do I need to check it myself? The grand roll is coming up too soon for that.
With a wry smile, MacDonald backed down, probably because he sensed that he might be pulverized by the whirlwind of magic energy that was now emanating from Inorai.
Mias, didn't you just say that duels between mages never should have been made popular?
Sharp, I said that they are unnecessary and meaningless. Get it right, son.
There seemed to be a trace of kindness in the old woman's voice. Like Lord Trambellio, the Lord of the Department of Creation was one of the three great families. If the two ever got into a fight, it would put entire factions at stake. A swirl of sand formed beside Inorai's hand. It meant that terrifying magecraft from the Lord of Creation would soon follow.
Heartless wants to use Spirit Tomb Albion to completely alter the way magecraft exists in the modern day.
Shocked, I was dumbfounded as my mentor's voice echoed away in the receding light. Had no idea what my mentor was talking about. Ever since I became my mentor's disciple, I had encountered all kinds of unbelievable things. A great example of this was the super weapon of Atlas hidden in my hometown, which had the ability to make it feel like I was traveling back in time. However, this was different. It was far more significant than what had happened at Adra, the Castle of Separation, or at the Twin Towers of Ilsema. Even the incident at my hometown would only affect Wales, at worst. This would impact the way all magecraft existed in the modern day. In a certain sense, it was the first large-scale crisis we had encountered.
Picturing us mages always aim for the root.
My mentor brought up something that had come up many times before. The root was the ultimate goal of all modern mages, an end that must be reached at any cost. Though no one knew that the root was, my mentor said that it was the origin of everything. That was why the clock tower devoted an endless amount of resources to pass their dreams on to the next generation, even going as far as to redevelop Spirit Tomb Albion.
Questioning, but what if we don't need to anymore?
The same ridiculous sound escaped my throat again. Sir, hasn't it been Mage's ultimate wish for 2,000 years? I think you've said several times that now that the age of the gods has ended, mages have no choice but to aim for the root. They can't just suddenly stop needing to, can they? My mentor did not respond immediately. Perhaps because he saw something that was beyond my imagination. He spent some time mulling over his words before he spoke.
I have to reiterate, I'm mostly confident in this hypothesis, but it's still a hypothesis. Understood?
Yes.
Lecturing, good. First, the mages of the Age of the Gods do not aim for the root because they don't have to. This is because the root is quite close to them.
I had heard this explanation many times before. Modern mages chased after the root, but ancient mages did not.
Informative Faker is an example.
Reminiscent by now, we were already familiar with her. She was a servant who had been summoned from many millennia ago.
Lecturing the magecraft we know of is no more than the manipulation of formulas. It is only a trick to briefly fool the world. Their magecraft, on the other hand, directly connected with the root and divine spirits. No, the gods themselves.
Oh, was that so? I thought?
We only know how to fool the world. They had the power to rewrite it however they wished. That is how powerful divine spirits are. Of course, they could only wield a fragment of the gods' powers, but they were still far more powerful than we can ever aspire to be. Some of their spells are similar to the 10-count spells we use to deceive the world, but they are still fundamentally different. You could say that we are entire dimensions behind them. They were capable of changing the world with a single word by simply invoking the gods.
The rules had changed. I had heard something similar before in a lecture. Even a 10-count spell had its limitations, but it was capable of somewhat influencing the laws of reality. For instance, a high-level spell like reversing the pull of gravity in an area or making light travel at the speed of a snail for a few minutes was very close to reaching the rules of the world. Besides that, there were forbidden things like reality marbles that achieved a similar effect. Can you wait a second, please? I heard a grating noise inside my head. It was easy to understand mystic eyes and labyrinths because they were easy to imagine. The magecraft of the entire clock tower, however, was too conceptual for my brain to handle. Magecraft today is different from magecraft in the Age of the Gods. That I can understand at least somewhat, because mages from the Age of the Gods are very close to the root. They don't need to chase after it. I'm not sure why, but I can understand that as well. But what does all of this have to do with Heartless?
I'm afraid that, no, I'm sure of it. Heartless wants to create a god for mages.
Shocked, I was at a loss for words. It was just too far-fetched. Is something like that even possible?
Informative, it's not impossible. There are already legends that Iskandar was a descendant of Zeus. There is even evidence of people attempting to make him an Olympian. There were already plenty of heroes who were later deified, so why couldn't someone as great as him become one as well? Like I said before, there were even rumors that he was a reincarnation of the Egyptian god the Mun.
My mentor's voice carried a strange mix of vexation and admiration.
Analytical on top of that, a similar ritual meant to draw out greater mystery is being held right now in the Far East. All Heartless needs to do is adjust it slightly.
I could feel a tingling sensation on my skin. It was probably because something similar had come up in every incident so far. They all aimed for something great enough to change the world, such as one of the 7 superweapons of the Atlas Institute. But how?
Lecturing like you said, lady. Spirit Tomb Albion is a labyrinth.
My mentor and my mentor had already explained the significance of labyrinths in magecraft. An initiation surrounding death and rebirth.
Exactly. Faker is Iskandar's shadow, and the properties of a labyrinth apply to heroic spirits as well. Since both Faker's class and identity are shadows, the ritual will naturally be connected to the true Iskandar in the Throne of Heroes.
I wanted to shout that it couldn't be possible. However, it made sense. We had already established that Heartless wanted to summon the true Iskandar. That was the core of my mentor's earlier deductions. If that wasn't the case, he wouldn't have despaired.
Analytical, then upon establishing a connection, it is necessary to extract a more refined spirit origin. I suppose you could call it the process of ascension.
Ascension?
Lecturing, of course, this is all usually within the bounds of a heroic spirit. On the other hand, however close the heroic spirit gets to their original essence, they are still far from a divine spirit. No matter how many times you ascend them, they are still only a servant. Class labels like Faker or Saber already restrict heroic spirits to a single facet of their abilities. That's why I never considered this possibility before.
Observant, my mentor's voice was unusually powerful. Perhaps it was because this blind spot still existed, even after he had thought it through so many times. This possibility had been deemed too absurd to actually happen.
Questioning. There are many elements required to create a divine spirit. Had, you know about them, right?
Yes. Hi, hee hee. It's not every day I get called on by the teacher.
Amused, I find it rather apt that your seal is similar.
Wrong a many yards, no ordinary noble phantasm. It's very close to the origin of the planet. If this seal had never gotten smacked onto it, the user would gradually become a divine spirit.
That was why Ad existed. The gravekeepers before me said that it was necessary to seal Vongaminiad away. I had thought that it was simply because the mystery inside it would fade away. I had never known that there was another purpose.
It never affected King Arthur in the decades that she owned it. There are no substantial effects to using Rongdominiad within a human lifespan. All it does is make the wielder ever so slightly more like a divine spirit.
Analytical. Exactly. There just isn't enough time. It takes an enormous amount of time to make a deity through receiving worship and divine energy. Faith also needs to spread throughout the population, which requires even longer.
Time. I seem to recall hearing something related not long ago. I immediately remembered a foreign-sounding name. Oh, that's where Emmy is.
Exactly. That's where the seal-designated magecraft of Imia comes in.
Indeed, that was a spell to create a flow of time separate from everything else. Wait. I seemed to hear the sound of puzzle pieces falling into place. It was simultaneously exhilarating and dreadful, as if I was watching an anthill collapse in on itself. Cold winter wind blew across my face. My mentor took out a cigar and attempted to light it with shaking fingers. He succeeded in the end, and purple smoke began to trail from it.
He analytical. The problem of time can be solved with Emia's magecraft. It was originally intended to be used to reach the end of time in order to arrive at the root. In this situation, because servants cannot age, they cannot be overloaded. It's just like how a few thousand years are nothing compared to the billions of years the Earth has existed for. Another thing, the grand roll is always held in a special location in the very center of Spirit Tomb Albion.
I gasped. No one had told me about this.
While the grand roll is being held, a special dam is unsealed. Because it is a ritual of sorts, it is held in the heart of the ancient dragon.
Reminiscent I had seen that name before on Zwei's diagram. The Ancient Heart, also known as the very center of Spirit Tomb Albion.
When that happens, the ancient heart will be flooded with magical energy that cannot be found anywhere else. That is probably why Heartless chose to summon Iskandar right now. The heart is an underground observatory of the inner sea of the planet. As the magical energy of the ancient dragon swells, the conditions are perfect to transform a heroic spirit into a divine spirit.
My mentor's words were like a string of incantations. I had never thought that this would be possible. However, my mentor's deductions gradually gave Heartless' plot a shape. Of course, this was what magecraft was meant to be like. It was the way of a mage to manipulate mystery to create unbelievable results.
Then the coin from just then becomes important. Money and the economy that results from it is one of the strongest beliefs of mankind. In that case, it should be very easy to create some form of worship using coins as a medium. Ha! A trick like this is really emblematic of modern magecraft, isn't it? It should be quite simple to establish a path, because the coin was already connected to Iskandar when he was still alive, especially considering that this is Heartless we're dealing with.
Beliefs and divine spirits. In other words, he didn't aim to recreate a god through faith. Instead, Heartless wanted to draw power from the god through faith.
After Iskandar becomes a divine spirit, this golden coin will become a grand mystic code that acts as a bond between God and mage. It's not hard to imagine New Age, though it probably requires a similar amount of training. Just in a different form. Those mages have no future right now. With this, they will suddenly become mages of the age of the gods. They will be able to escape the confines of their bloodlines.
I didn't know what to say. But was that wrong? Did it need to be stopped? It was the opportunity that countless mages like my mentor probably hoped for. A way to achieve great things regardless of what family they were born into. In a certain sense, didn't my mentor wish for this just as much as reuniting with Iskandar? It made perfect sense why my mentor would be troubled. After following this chain of reasoning until its end, Heartless had turned the tables and trapped my mentor instead. I finally understood why he didn't ask for my mentor's help. His goal fit too well.
Determined, I must aftergo him.
Oh, what if we first head to the place where the grand roll is being held, and go from there?
Frustrated, we can't. The Grand Roll was designed to be impervious to distractions. No one can leave or enter during the day. To get there, participants need to use a portal that opens from the mining city. It doesn't make sense if lords had to go dungeon crawling every time a Grand Roll is held, does it?
Maybe he intended that as a joke, but I found it hard to laugh. My mentor's pace quickened as he started toward the train station. Title cast by our Tally Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening.
We're returning to Slur Street. I need to discuss something with Rhines. Depending on how the Grand Roll goes, we might need to call on the help of other lords.
But there might be an accomplice if Heartless is there, I thought. As I walked after my mentor in the growing darkness, I felt as if we were caught in the palm of a giant's hand. MacDonald stared silently at the sands swirling atop the table. He knew the old woman's magecraft very well. She had 3 elements: earth, wind, and water. However, this rare gift was hardly impressive next to her lineage, which had existed for millennia. The true terror of Lord Violetta lay in the fact that she was the most mage-like mage that MacDonald knew. Even a plot built up over a decade could fall to pieces at her feet if she so wished. If anything arose that conflicted with her beliefs as a mage, Inorai Violetta Traum would toss away those mundane thoughts without a moment of hesitation. That was how the situation was kept stable, even though one of the most proper departments had joined the Democratic faction. The sand continued to swirl. How fatal could she make this handful of sand? After a few more seconds of hesitation, MacDonald made his choice.
I give up. I'll confess, he announced. Then he turned. Oh, my shoulders are sore. Could you help, Melvin-kun?
Of course.
Melvin stood up with a nod. MacDonald smiled as he picked up his violin case.
I haven't gotten to show off in front of Mrs. Inorai for a while. I still remember getting reprimanded by you because my reports were formatted incorrectly back when I was still a student.
Well, you certainly haven't gotten rid of your bad habit of rushing things.
Peaceful, although this restaurant would often invite famous musicians to play, the music was rarely this wonderful. Melvin's tuning was more than just a way to enhance magic circuits. It was also enjoyable on a purely musical level.
Simply wonderful. I see the magical energy in the tune revitalizes magic circuits. This is what true immersion feels like. If it weren't for your physical condition, I might even consider making you my successor.
Oh. Please don't spook me by flattering me like that. It might make me vomit blood.
Neutral seeing Melvin continue to play his violin without being affected at all. MacDonald smiled.
I have something I want to ask you. Which do you value more, friends or family?
The tune of the violin continued. Since Melvin had been entrusted by MacDonald to perform a task, he would do so with perfection.
That's a direct question. Should I take this as an order from the head of the family?
No, there's no need to take it that seriously.
Worried even if you say so, Mama will be troubled if I don't.
Ah, I never intended on troubling the head of the Wines family.
Wait. Worried something was wrong. It felt as if he suddenly found himself almost submerged in water. The entire room has been swallowed up by Lord Trembellio.
The restaurant was filled with potent magical power, and Melvin felt as if someone had just dunked him into a pool. Lord Trembellio had achieved this just then, when he nearly fought Inorai. Just like how Inorai began to manipulate sand, Lord Trembellio also prepared to unleash the magecraft he was proficient at. Typically, magecraft beyond a certain threshold required the user to take in large amounts of mana from the air and then light it with their own odors of fuse. However, the magical energy emanating from MacDonald was enough to forego this process entirely.
The silence we hold dear burns brighter than fire. Sheep will burn quietly. Did you notice it as well, Melvin-kun?
Yes, he had.
The fire had burnt the thing to a crisp, and its charred remains fell to the ground outside the building.
Using a familiar. It probably came from the absent neutral faction. If they care so much, why don't they just attend the grand roll?
Melvin remained silent. If MacDonald had used mana, the familiars would have noticed and escaped. Instead, he only used the odor inside himself, slaughtering them all before they could realize. This was one of the specialties of MacDonald Trambelio Elrond, a truly terrifying amount of raw power. Since he was a mage of the modern era, he needed to recite a one-count incantation. After that, he could use any number of spells connected to it because of the violent efficiency of his magic circuits. It was only natural that he was the most powerful person in the Trambelio faction. His qualifications were more than the average person could imagine. Lord Trambelio had outstanding abilities as a mage. Even though Melvin had witnessed the abilities of many mages as part of his job, it was the first time he had seen anything like this. Melvin could feel his knees tremble slightly, even though he had thought that he was more resistant to fear than his friend.
Sorry, Waver.
He could only succumb. Lord Trambellio's magecraft showed that Melvin didn't stand a chance again. If he didn't retreat here, he might slip up and make a fatal mistake. That was why Inorai and MacDonald had made a scene on purpose. No, that was more than a performance. If someone had misstepped, maybe it would devolve into a duel. That was why the clock tower was so scary. It was a game of kings, where a surge of emotion could dictate the fate of the entire world.
Is the tuning over?
I guess so. If you want something more professional, please visit my workshop later.
I see. I'll look forward to it then. Let us continue our conversation.
With the light tinkling of bells, the door opened and a tall figure entered the room. It was a dark-skinned woman, whose eyes shone full of intention. Though Melvin didn't know her, he figured that she must be important.
Neutral. As I was saying, this is my source of information. This is Ashara, mistress of the secret autopsy division. She is one of Heartless' students, possibly one of the last people he ever taught.
Melvin had a vague impression of that name because he exchanged information with Rains quite often. Of course, there were certain things that they couldn't talk about because of their positions, but he recalled that Ashara was one of Heartless' former students. After meeting with Lord El-Melloi II at the secret autopsy division, she had disappeared. All of this was already remarkable, but the woman's response was even more shocking.
Please don't do this, Father.
Melvin was momentarily at a loss for words.
There's, as she said, she is also my 12th daughter.
What?
Is that strange?
Well, I know you have many wives and daughters. You are a lord, so certain things can be excused. But it's an entirely different matter if she's a part of the secret autopsy division.
Neutral, I already said that I was going to explain. A while ago, I was on a secret joint expedition to Spirit Tomb Albion. I met Ashara at the mining city, and I couldn't help but notice her wit and resilience, and her appearance, of course, but that goes without saying. I wanted to send a special request to get her back to the...
Neutral. I wouldn't have been able to help that way.
Of course, Melvin knew of McDaniel's habits. To put it nicely, he had a lot of love to dispense. Melvin reckoned that McDaniel had enough wives and daughters to play baseball against each other. Either way, it was an extremely effective tactic to gain power through political marriages in the world of magecraft. However, it had never crossed his mind that one of Heartless' students would be McDonald's daughter.
Inorai stared at her with a gaze full of ice. The light of the chandelier illuminated her hand, which was firmly atop the classified files from the secret autopsy division.
I can't allow Dr. Heartless to continue going after his students, so I called her back. Perhaps I'll be mocked, but I must protect my daughter.
MacDonald put a hand on his daughter's shoulder and smiled again. That gesture alone conveyed the bond his family had, even though many were not related by blood.
We're doomed. The lords had cards up their sleeves. They either diligently collected them for the grand roll tomorrow, or revealed them to cause panic. Revealing Ashara's identity here was so that the Democratic faction would be more united. In other words, to prevent backstabbing. He was implying that it wasn't a good idea to go against someone with so many cards. If the need came up, he could also play cards to threaten others. Up until now, Melvin had been confused as to why he was called here. But now, McDonald's reasoning was clear. Melvin was the obvious choice, as he was a convenient source of information who was moderately rebellious and somewhat prominent. Above all that, Melvin was also trusted by the people around him. McDonald had clearly calculated the right moment to incinerate the familiar of the neutral faction. He intended on leaking the knowledge that he had information from the secret autopsy division.
There were plenty of monsters lurking about the clock tower. However, not many could match Lord Trambellio in his skill at playing this delicate game of cards. He was doing exactly what he claimed the Democratic faction stood for, deceiving the masses. One could say that he was the king of the new era.
There was one thing in Melvin's mind as he saw McDonald's smile. As long as my desperate attempt reaches you.
Pytho, by the time we arrived at the station, night had completely set in. I peered across the interweaving branches that grew from the crumbling platform at the constellations that hung in the winter sky. Perhaps because the light from the streetlights was faint, each star glittered brilliantly. But my mind was fixed on matters that went on in a place that the light of the stars could not reach, as if they wanted to hide from the stars' gaze.
Damn it, she's not picking up.
Worried.
I told her the gist of things before we boarded the bus. After that, I wanted to talk about the way forward, but she hung up and wouldn't pick up no matter how many times I called. All she sent was a text that said, "I get it. There's a pointless struggle heading your way. I'll leave the decision to you."
A pointless struggle. It did sound like something Rhaenys would say, but I had no idea what it meant. That was why I was a bit slow in realizing the change in the train station. Worried. No one else is here? Of course. This was a random station, in the countryside, so it wasn't impossible that no one was there. However, it was around 7 p.m., so it felt a bit strange.
Oh.
My mentor entered a preparative stance, strengthening his limbs. Perhaps because he was more timid than other people, he gave the impression of being reliable. Mysterious slowly, a thick mist surrounded us. It was evidently the creation of some kind of magecraft. Not far behind it was the sound of steam which did not belong in this era. Wait, this is... Mysterious, the front of a rust-coloured engine cleaved apart the fog at the head of a metallic train. Its side rods moved in unison like musicians' bows in an orchestra, creating a strangely nostalgic tune. The rail Zeppelin? The old-fashioned train complemented the crumbling station well, adding a sense of beauty to the otherwise mundane scene. My mentor and I stood there, frozen in place. Our reaction made sense, considering the events that had occurred on this train. The door of the train opened slowly, revealing the silhouette of a thin man. It was Rodane, the conductor of the rail Zeppelin, whose name I had almost forgotten.
Good evening, Lord El-Melloi II.
Why are you here?
It appears that Mr. Melvin Wines' intuition was correct.
Mr. Melvin? Mr.
Neutral indeed. Mr. Melvin informed us of Heartless's flight to Spirit Tomb Albion and decided that you might wish to pursue him. He contacted us to help you with that goal. We also have unsettled scores with Dr. Heartless after all.
There was a shocking amount of enthusiasm in his otherwise emotionless voice.
Not only did he interrupt our famous Mystic Eye auction, but he also caused us to waste many sets of precious Mystic Eyes in a pointless battle. As a result, our deputy manager is still dormant. We cannot allow him to continue to wreak carnage.
That was true. The rail Zeppelin had suffered significant losses because of the fight with Heartless and Faker. Regardless of the identity of the owner of the train, it was impossible to simply ignore this disgrace. Melvin had probably considered this, which was why he chose to play this card now. Now was the perfect time to use the rail Zeppelin's undivided support to finally corner Heartless.
We have also spoken with Miss Ryans. We understand why you wish to head to Spirit Tomb Albion.
So that was why Rhaenys had said that. Even if she wasn't talking to my mentor, I felt as if she would have said something similar.
Our train can take you to the mining city. It should be the best way of traveling there.
Rodin said this because the rail Zeppelin travelled between worlds, much like Spiritum Albion, which also didn't exist within the same bounds as the rest of the world. This fact made the rail Zeppelin one of the best ways to travel there. But could we really accept the offer so easily? Sir?
If Rains is giving you so much information, she is probably prepared to attend the grand role in my place. I see. That's why she didn't answer my calls. She'd definitely rather throw me into the middle of a whirlpool than properly explain. Worried, but Gray and I won't be able to achieve anything. Heartless has probably reached as far as the Great Magic Circuit by now, and Gray is the only one who can fight. I won't allow my students to continue to be involved in this either.
We are aware of that. So they're already here.
They're already here? The second the question left my mouth, the answer appeared.
Hey!
A certain mage opened the door to the train and waved at us cheerfully. He had a stocky build, tanned skin, and an unkempt beard that was tucked into a dirty headscarf. In the darkness of the empty train station, he looked as if he stood in a ray of sunlight, in stark contrast to the ominous hues that surrounded most of the mages I met. No matter what the rest of the world was like, I got the feeling that he would always remind me of a refreshing gust of desert wind.
What are you staring at? Have you forgotten about me? Does the name Flu ring any bells?
It was Fluger, the astrologer who we had met at Adra, the castle of separation.
Why are you here, Mr. Flu?
I actually accepted a commission from your little sister a long time ago. She asked me to go to Spiritum Albion. Actually, ordered is probably a better word to describe her attitude. So I got on this train.
So it was Miss Rayners. She had probably contacted Melvin not long after my mentor and I headed here. After that, while Melvin prepared the train, she had recruited people to join us on our trek through the labyrinth. Perhaps she had even considered this before my mentor found out Heartless' goal. Flu was not the only one here, either. Someone else stood behind the astrologer.
Newtara, it's been a while, El-Melloi.
He was missing his right arm. I knew I would never forget that I had done that to him with Rongamaniad. A black eye patch covered his right eye, and a small hat known as a tokin sat on his head. My mentor had told me back at Adra Castle that this was the attire of those in Japan who practiced shujendo.
Jirobu Sagan Tokuto. Excuse me, can I call you Sagan?
To make a long story short, Saigon was the culprit in the case at Adra Castle. Another persona had been given to him unwillingly after he had his magic crest repaired there. In other words, his magic crest had overwritten his original persona. It was possible that the person we knew as Saigon no longer existed.
Hi, Junwoks. The memories of the boy from the castle are mixed with my. Sometimes I can't tell whether I'm Jubo Seigen Tokito or Gani de Ashborn. Either way, I'm still Seigen. Aribi gara ikikomida.
How much time had it taken him to arrive at this conclusion? The idea of not knowing which of your memories and feelings actually belonged to you terrified me. What must have you felt when his body twisted into something else?
I see.
Naitara, do you still remember Hainai Study's younger sister, Rosalind?
Of course.
Heine was the monk who had lost his life at Adra Castle, also known as the Knight. He had originally gone to the Castle of Separation to repair the magic crest of the Astari family, which had been altered after it had been transplanted onto Rosalind. After he got there, Segin Granite Ashbourne had killed him. Recalling this, a wry smile appeared on Segin's face.
I swear, your little sister is a demon in disguise. She said that her family would protect Rosalind to the best of their ability, in exchange for small favor.
It was true. It was impossible for Saigon to refuse such an offer. Though Saigon had technically killed Heine, he had built up a friendship with him before Granite Ashbourne took over, so Heine had entrusted him to protect Rosalind.
My apologies. I also believe that she is a demon.
I agreed as well. Maybe I should talk to Rhaenys about it later, but I figured she probably knew it better than anyone else.
뉴타라페세 유니디고 피코도 잡아 스피리토 마비온 돈데. There's another person waiting.
In neutral, soon, a displeased voice rang out from the train.
And here I was, thinking that I wouldn't meet you for quite a while.
It was a voice that I last heard only half a day ago. I hadn't thought that the young woman would command the night the same way she did the day, but it was quite the opposite. The mist in the station decorated her impeccable golden curls, which framed her striking face. Her cobalt dress wafted about in the breeze, making me feel as if I was at a ball. It was Luviagalita Edelfelt. You as well?
Blame the astrologer over there.
Fluger looked away immediately, trying to pass it off.
Aha, I did a little fortune telling, and guess what? It told me that the most powerful person I know happens to be in London. I simply had to invite you. Don't you agree?
Neutral? I don't, but I can see that the matter at hand is interesting. A chance to ride the Rail Zeppelin does not offer itself up every day, especially not to Spiritum Albion.
Luvia had hired Fluger back at Adra Castle to kill my mentor. Her definition of kill was not the boring, simple kind. It was far worse. That lady wants to prove your worthlessness in a way that practically renders you dead in the world of magecraft. Her way of thinking is so political it makes me want to laugh. I think that was when I decided I didn't hate Luvia. Before I knew my mentor very well, I thought that all mages were extremely weird. They seemed to all be drowning in 1,000 years' worth of hopeless delusions. The darkness that I witnessed at that castle had left a deep impression in my heart. However, it also taught me that mages who sought to fight against the darkness existed. My experiences at Adra Castle probably made me sympathize with mages for the first time. Plume neutral, Luvia slowly walked down onto the concrete of the platform toward my mentor.
I understand that you do not want your students to be involved in your conflicts. I am not one of your students. Surely that allows me to join you in your quest.
And yet you keep asking me to become your tutor.
Does that mean you finally agree to be my tutor?
No, not at all. So I have a request for you all.
My mentor lowered his hands and looked to the mages, addressing each of them in turn.
Luviagalita Edelfelt, Fluger the Astrologer, Jirobo Segen Tokito. Could you please lend me your strength to solve a personal issue of mine? My request is demanding. It involves taking an entire day to traverse Spiritum Albion and defeat Heartless and the Ghost Liner whom he has a contract with.
Though you still have to specify that it's a personal issue at this point. I'm just a mercenary though. It's not my job to question my employer about unnecessary things.
Oh, and I don't really have a choice.
Both Flu and Segan accepted without much hesitation.
I know how urgent the situation is, and I cannot allow you to be left alone.
Everyone here is from the first case. Of course, the first case technically was the one that happened at my hometown. Aside from that, I had a strong impression of the incident at Adra, the Castle of Separation. That was the first time I had seen my mentor dissect magecraft to solve a case. If I were to record all of these events into a case file of sorts, I would definitely make that story the first chapter.
Neutral can I hand? The next part to you.
Yes, the Rail Zeppelin shall take you to Spiritum Albion.
Neutral, after a bow, Rodan gestured to the door of the train. As if the train itself understood, the noble sound of a whistle pierced through the night.